For what it's worth, I am not naked. I am just on the ground in a strapless top because this was the best place to film. I'm currently in fucking Medellin, Colombia. Don't ask, I'll explain in the vlog basically what I'm doing here. But this April is when more straightforward tension really resumes. End of April and March was a pretty haywire set of weeks where there was aggression and then there was lack of clarity around what actual actions would back up a lot of really obscure claims. April is when things become more streamlined to then be rethought in April and the very end of April and May. So if you're excited to get into this, do make sure that you hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell so you always make sure you can hear about what the stars have in store for you. If you're new here, I am Maren. I'm an astrologer. I'm a crypto trader, investor, just absolute cringe-worthy individual. Happy to tell you what's happening this April. And as always, if you want to catch your April rising sign forecasts and the complete videos on the full new moons, all that listed, do check that out down below. As always on my channel, we go through each sign every month and also the full and new moons, or in this case, the eclipses that are happening. And for context, I'm using the tropical zodiac within whole sign houses as I practice mainly traditional Hellenistic astrology. So we start out on the 1st with a new moon in Aries. This is the start of the new Astro New Year. This is extremely optimistic. This is extremely impulsive and courageous. And you can watch the full video on this new moon. But the number one thing that a new moon in Aries stands for is literally the match lighting the fire, where it is cardinal fire. It is setting off like the fastest race. It's a rocket launching. So there is an element of impulsive courage to start out the month, which if you want to use can be really, really valuable for supercharging something that you don't want to think twice about embarking on, something that is a bucket list or fearful event that you know you really want to do deep down. After that, I do want to note that April 4th to 6th, Mars will conjoin Saturn in Aquarius, and this has been an event that I've been anticipating for several months now because Mars and Saturn are conjoining at 22 degrees of Aquarius. This will be exactly squaring the north and the south nodes at 22 degrees of Taurus and Scorpio. This, being at the bending of the nodes, the 90-degree inflection point, is full of tension, and it's kind of like a breaking point or missing piece that we have to consider in order to move forward with balancing the north and the south node in a degree of harmony. In the sign of Aquarius, Mars and Saturn together is pushing the brakes and the gas at the same time to default back on logic, not going towards hedonism, not going towards emotional sadism, but literally logic. And I know that sounds strange and nebulous, but it's not. It's asking you to take very direct, very aggressive action that is logical in order to achieve the comfort and the balance in your life that's necessary. Sorry, computer died. I'm using a computer for light right now because there's no light sources and I forgot my ring light and I left my tripod in Denver. All my tripods, literally everything I have. This is extremely active in the charts of several world leaders, so I'm going to start out with Putin's chart because this is right on his north node and his IC. Mars-Saturn together is military action, it is aggressive, it is placing a boundary around our anger and therefore is very calculated aggressive action. On his north node, this is extremely ambitious action on his part, but on his natal IC, this is around what he's guarding. It's a defensive measure. And I would say that with the North Node often propelling you into the limelight or into the public eye, this looks very provocative, very aggressive, and it's opposite his Pluto and his midheaven. So with it being on his IC opposite his Pluto, I think it has to do with him defending like nation, him defending what he sees at his land. He's more on the defensive. I would say that it looks more like there's things done towards him that he's then retaliating towards, rather than he being the first person to embark on this. And with it squaring his natal Mercury in the 12th house, Mercury ruling his 8th house of data or shared information and 11th house of alliances, I think there's financial turmoil being enacted towards him and that he's on the defensive for this one. In Russia's chart, this is squaring their Venus, Pluto in the Scorpio 4th house, the area of the chart around safety and homeland, and it's happening in the 7th house of the opponent doing this, likely Ukraine and Ukraine's allies. So again, I think think it points towards Russia and Putin being on the defensive and other powers being on the offensive in this very, very tense time that I did want to point out charts to because it was that intense in so many of these charts. In Zelensky's chart, this is on his midheaven of public image, so I think he's doing something aggressive, but squaring his Pluto on the descendant, he does not have clarity, and he's kind of the blind leading the blind, frankly, here. Opposite his moon in the third, given that the moon represents the people that he's standing for and also his emotional well-being, that rules the second house of finances. I think this is taking a financial toll on his people, and I wonder if this is more so around like banks or at least natural resources, and the fact that he's doing something aggressive that does end up causing a lot of discomfort for the people remaining in Ukraine. It could also likely revolves around cyber or media-based attacks, given the third house implications. In Ukraine's chart, this is right on Ukraine's moon, and the moon in these charts often represents the people and the masses. So this is directly reflecting like bad or difficult things happening to the majority of people as a result of the aggression going on, which is obvious, but I mean, like, literally this is disrupting people's lives. This, given that the moon is ruling the seventh house of enemies and the second house of finances, again, taking a big financial toll on the country. But with the seventh house, it does involve Russia themselves. I believe it's how I would delineate this, is like directly there's retaliation that is taking a toll on them. Scoring natal Pluto in the 11th, there's questionable loyalty from other parties involved, and opposing Ukraine's Leo stellium in the 8th, there's an intense drama here that shows TLDR, I would say. Ukraine, Zelensky initiates action, Russia is on the defensive, they respond, and there is extreme discomfort and difficulty for people involved in both countries here. In Biden's chart, it's in the third house of media, scoring his 12th house Scorpio stellium, so it's challenging his mental stability and ability to respond to this in a media sense. He doesn't really know where to begin. It's not really a surprise there. Again, these things don't take a genius, but I'm reiterating kind of what common sense could show is happening in this time. In the United States' chart, this is right on the US moon, which is not overly active. It's within about 5 degrees. I don't think the US is the focus of this, with the moon being the people, ruling the 8th house of the markets and the 3rd house of the media. Shocking news of shaky world events leads to shaky markets. However, in other news, on the 6th, Venus is entering Pisces, which is lovely. Venus entering its sign of exaltation. Venus entering Pisces is actually pretty lovely for more getting along. Might be some travel restrictions lifted or just ability to travel a bit easier. Then on the 7th to the 17th, Jupiter will conjoin Neptune in Pisces. I'm going to be honest, in my video for like warnings for COVID and coming up, I thought that Jupiter and Neptune would do the same thing that it did in the 1918 to 20 pandemic, where Jupiter and Neptune joining was a random isolated fourth wave of a mutation that led to really intense lockdowns and very intense, let's get it over with, like this is really bad energy. I think that the lockdowns around the 7th to the 17th, exactly on April 12th, could be locking down and going into like bunkers, or I think it could be a different kind of lockdown where, similar to the 1920 time that this happened, it wasn't the exact same pandemic, it was not the exact same issue, it was a random isolated issue that led to locking down in specific areas around the world, which Jupiter and Neptune conjoining is the growth of something spreading, which is very strange to think of in a negative sense. Like, that's not my intuition, that's not my immediate response to Jupiter Neptune joining. Not intuition, I mean in a philosophical sense of like your intuitions or your immediate conclusions about things, not in the spiritual sense of like my intuition. This, I would say, the growth of isolation, the growth of suddenly needing to lock down because things are expanding that require immediate action. Around the 12th looks very likely. Then on the 10th, during that time frame, with Mercury squaring Pluto, whistleblower, suddenly someone is honest and lets out the truth. That's likely what lets us respond to this immediately. On the 15th, with Mars entering Pisces, there's more trouble, more aggression, more retaliation brought towards this. On the 16th, there's a full moon in Libra, a letting go of the elephant in the room, a letting go of being basically like, we're not going to address this, like things are on the table now, there's no more hiding behind the conflict. On the 18th, with the sun in Aries squaring Pluto in Capricorn, world leaders are now manipulating one another. On the 18th, with Mercury joining Uranus in Taurus, very sudden disruptive news. I mean, this middle of the month period is like all bets are off. There's no amiability. Like, it completely just disruptive news, likely around finance or world resources. End of the month is another little whammy of new energy. With the 27th to the 28th, Venus is conjoining Neptune in Pisces. This could be a wave of euphoria of like, oh, it's okay, all is good in this sense. But then Pluto stations retrograde on the 29th, beginning the period where no longer are all planets direct. We're now rethinking the massive transformations because Pluto is like, whoa, you thought we were going in this direction. Then on the 30th, there's a solar eclipse in Taurus. I have a full video on this solar eclipse because it is is the first lunation in the series of eclipses that we are starting off this cycle with. Solar eclipse is a new beginning on steroids that catalyzes events to mark the next 6 months in the sign of Taurus around world resources, natural resources, finances, stability, geopolitics, conjunct Uranus, which is a planet of destabilizing that area of the world. This is a radical new beginning that might be a new leader stepping up, because solar eclipses are traditionally the empowerment of someone new, even if it means at the fall of someone else. In Taurus, it's the restructuring of geopolitics, and alongside Venus conjoining Jupiter in Pisces, there's an air of this person taking on a huge amount of new responsibility. They're optimistic, they feel like on top of the fucking world, and this is restructuring geopolitics, maybe borders, financial payment rails, etc. I have a full video on what the nodes in Taurus and Scorpio mean for the year and a half ahead, but this is the first step, and it's kicking things off with a bang of restructuring geopolitics, someone new possibly coming into power in a way that is like they have a heavy crown to hold, basically. So it's not all bad necessarily. It's a lot of restructuring and shifting, but I will say that in the midst of this world climate, like, I'm not going to sugarcoat and be like, oh, cute transformation. No, this is not what's happening here. So if you have any thoughts around the astrology coming up in April, please let me know. I am filming this on the first day of March, so that things are very tense right now, and I don't necessarily expect them to, I definitely don't expect them to be dying down, let's just say, with the eclipses coming up. So let me know your thoughts below. Excited to hear from you all. Hope that you all are doing well. Safe wishes to everyone right now from me in Colombia, and I will see you in the next one.
Oh, but there is one